I got to tell you a story that I heard years and years and years ago from my dad. Shortly after my dad had returned from a week-long trip to New York, to a business trip, he came home and he said, "I've got to tell you a story that happened to me while I was in New York. I was invited to a man's home for dinner, and as I entered his home, I could tell things were kind of somber," he said. Things were very, very quiet, very hushed, very mellow. And while we were eating in the middle of the dinner, this man that hosted the dinner for my dad, his wife began to cry. And as this man patted his wife on the hand at dinner table, he turned to my dad and said, "I'm sorry. We lost our prized parakeet today." He said, "My wife opened the freezer door and somehow the bird flew in the freezer." And several hours later, she opened the freezer to dismay and gasp and shock and horror to find out that her parakeet had froze. Immediately, she grabbed the shoebox and put a towel in it and put the parakeet in it and rushed to the veterinarian's office. She went screaming into the veterinarian. "My prize parakeet is frozen," she said. The doctor said, "Calm down, let's take a look, let's take a look." So the veterinarian went back and took the parakeet out of the box and looked at it and put the stethoscope on the parakeet, and he said, "Sure enough, this parakeet is dead." And the wife, in despair, in desperation, in discouragement, said, "Is there anything you can do, doctor?" He said, "Well, let me try one thing." And he got a medicine dropper out and he gave the parakeet, he pried open the beak and gave the parakeet a couple of drops out of the medicine dropper. And sure enough, no response. His wife looked at the veterinarian and said, "He's still dead, huh?" And the veterinarian said, yeah, he is. The wife said, "Is there just anything at all you can do, doctor?" The doctor said, "Well, there's one trick that I learned from an old veterinarian 30, 40 years ago. Let me try it." He said, "I'll be back in just a second." And he excused himself, went out of the examination room, and a few minutes later he came back with another medicine bottle with a medicine dropper. And he looked at the bird and looked at the medicine bottle and pried open the bird's beak and put in 2 or 3 drops. And the doctor said, "Let's just wait for just a minute." Pretty soon he could see the bird, and he started to move one of his wings. And then he started to move one of his claws and his talons. And pretty soon, to shock and amazement of the lady, he opened his eye. The bird opened his eye. A few minutes later, the bird was up and walking around on the examination table. The lady, in joy and excitement, said, "Oh, doctor, thank you. You've saved his life." And the doctor said, "Hold on, not yet." The doctor said, "Let's just wait." Another 10 or 15 seconds, and all of a sudden the bird took off, flying hysterically and frantically and faster than she'd ever seen the bird fly before. Made 3 or 4 laps around the ceiling, around the room, and then went full speed head on into the light and hit the light fixture. Smack! The bird wobbled, fell down onto the examination table. The lady looked at the doctor and said, "Is he dead?" Doctor said, nope. He's just out of gas. And my dad laughed and laughed and laughed and laughed at that joke. And my dad, for the many years, he said that was his favorite joke that he'd ever heard.